What's up, guys? We're back again just like that. Just got done recording my fishing report video for you guys, and we are on to the next one already. What I'm going to give you guys in this video is I'm going to give you 3 very easy, very simple tips to follow that are going to increase your chances of putting a big bag of fish in your boat here on Lake Okeechobee here during the winter months. These tips could possibly and definitely could help you all throughout the year, but they're really going to be key players in catching big fish and numbers of fish here during the winter time. I know we're technically in fall right now, but I say it time and time again. Here on Okeechobee, we kind of skimp over fall, we skimp over spring, we really just have winter and summer. So these tips are, like I said, they're very simple to follow, but I believe that they are tips that are drastically overlooked in the grand scheme of things when it comes to catching big fish out here. So we'll just kind of dive into it. Number one, kind of the main saying here when bass fishing in Florida is if you're not in a crowd, you are not on the fish. And although no one wants to fish in a parking lot or a crowd of boats, it never ceases to amaze me that every year there will be a area 2 or 3 that are the 3 best areas on the lake, and they're going to hold a large number of boats every day of the week, right? Whether it's a tournament day, whether it's a Wednesday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, whatever it might be. These are just areas that these fish have chosen or set up right for this time, or this year, that have set up right where fish are going to be holding in and or funneling in and out of continuously. And the same thing goes for boats. Those fish that are flowing in and out continuously are going to have boats that are targeting them going in and out continuously, right? And there will always be those little, oddballs that find, or individuals that find smaller groups of fish, smaller productive areas that they can break down, have to themselves, really take the time to pick apart, and you will have great success doing that. There just might not be the biomass of fish that are calling that area home or going in and out of. So one of the big things I'm going to tell you and the big tips is on this lake, do not really let boat pressure deter you from fishing an area. Now, the reason I'm going to say this, I'm trying to break this down, is I'm not telling you to go bent rod pattern everyone on Okeechobee, which is a big problem. If you're running down the lake and you see 20 boats in a spot, the common thing you see everyone do is just come off pad and troll in there and get in the crowd. I'm not a fan of that. I try my absolute best to never do that. I just don't feel like that's right. But listen, if you just want to catch fish, you're out here on a Wednesday, what's it going to hurt? At the grand scheme of, or at the same time, if you are in an area and you start catching fish and boats start coming in and around you, a lot of times that's going to affect us, the fishermen, way, way more than it's going to affect the fish. All right. I tell people all the time, this is not just an open boat. These fish are accustomed to boats firing up them engines. They're accustomed to trolling motors ripping through pads, ripping through the Kissimmee grass, boats going in and out of boat lanes. I feel like our fish are used to having boat presence on them a lot more than a lot of other lakes or fish are used to. Okay, this lake gets fished 365 days a year. And the whole edge and perimeter, all the grass has boats in it at some, point in time. That was one of my biggest learning curves on the lake is, I always thought, if there's 3 boats that just went, fish through an area that you cannot fish behind them and catch fish, but that cannot be any further from the truth. Boat pressure, like I said, you want to try and avoid it, but try your best not to let it get to you. They don't have as big of an effect on the fish as you would think. If you look at what Scott Martin did in the last Open here back in February, there were legitimately we're going to call it a 6-acre block. There were 87, counting him, 88 boats on the spot, okay? And he still was able to pull 90 pounds out of that area in 3 days. The fish do not react. I feel like they don't spook as much as we give them, that we like to think they do from the boats. So really try your best to block that out. Do like Scott did. He put his hood up, he put his buff on, he didn't pay attention to anything that was going on, and he just concentrated on the task at hand, which was catching big fish. So I feel like a lot of people think, oh, there's 2 boats in here, this area is ruined. Not the case at all. That's a big tip. Following that tip, what kind of coincides with that is slowing down. Slowing down on this lake is probably one of the biggest tips and one of the biggest things that separates great anglers on this lake from just everyday or good anglers on this lake. Slowing down. That was my biggest takeaway, my biggest learning curve with learning this lake was learning to slow down. And there's a big misconception with the term slowing down. Rick Clunn said it best one day. I heard him say on a video, slowing down in Florida means you can work your bait as fast as you want. It means slowing your boat down and or not moving your boat. We have power poles, use them. And that could not be any more accurate in my opinion. If you find an area that you are getting bit, let me tell you something, guys, you cannot, I don't care how good you are, you cannot catch all the fish. On top of which, you can't catch all that's there, but this time of year, which is why I'm predominantly talking about the winter time, these patterns and these tips going to help you, we constantly have fish coming in and coming out. During the summertime, a lot of time, aside from schooling fish, when you're flipping reeds or you're going through the thing of Kissimmee grass, what's there is there. These fish are not highly migratory. They're not really on the move. They're just kind of staged and set up there. Whereas in the wintertime, you have fish leaving from spawning. You have fish coming in to stage to spawn. You have the fish that are already set up in these areas. So you have fish coming and going to you the whole time you're sitting there. The less you move your boat, the better your opportunities are, granted that you're in a very productive area. So my biggest learning curve when I started fishing BFLs and things is I would find a good stretch. I would go through there, whether it was throwing a big easy, a swim jig, and or flipping, and I would catch a good bag of fish. I'd work my way through the area and I'd crank up and I'm on to the next spot. And every time I'd come home and talk to my wife or talk to buddies, whatever it might be about my day, they would say, well, you didn't get bit when you went back through there a couple of times after? And I'd say, I never did. I mean, I caught the fish that were there. And like an idiot, I would never even just turn the boat around. Make another pass through that stretch. Put your poles down. Sit and wait. Fish it for 20 minutes. Pick it apart. Really throw it that isolated piece of cover. Really pick that mat apart, whatever it might be. Maybe if you do leave, come back. And I'm talking some of these areas will be the size of a bedroom. And it would amaze you the amount of fish that can stay in one small area or spot or be using that area to transition. Slow down. Put your poles down. Even if you're catching them on a bait like a chatterbait, ripping a chatterbait, that's fine. Keep ripping that chatterbait. Reel it as fast as you want, but don't move your boat. Fish that area as thoroughly as you can. And on top of that, change tactics. If you are catching them on a chatterbait, or I was using that as an example, and they just seem to turn off, pick up a speed worm, pick up a spook, pick up something and show them something else. Go through the gamut of different presentations, and then possibly go back to your bread and butter and after giving them a break from looking at it, maybe pick your poles up, move 20 feet, and reposition your boat. I can't tell you how many times that just bringing that bait through an area or across a piece of cover from a different direction will get you 5 or 6 more bites. It's really crazy to think of, but I can't tell you how many times that happens. Probably that's number 2. Number 3, this is probably the biggest tip I'm going to give you. I'd say slowing down is probably the biggest tip, but this is something that is going to catch more fish in that 8 to 10 pound range this winter than anything else combined, everything else combined, if done right. And a lot of people do know how to do it right. But I'm going to just label it as like finesse flipping, as dumb as that sounds. But this guy right here, I have no idea what brand this Senko style bait is. I've got everyone under the sun from Gambler Fat Aces to Bass Pro Stickos to Yamamoto Senkos to everyone who makes a Sticko style bait. Whatever's on clearance, whatever's on sale, I buy, and I've got them all in a giant baggie, okay? But that guy with a 3/16 or a 5/16 or even an 1/8 ounce weight, depending on the wind and the bottom content, just a 6-inch stick bait with I've got a 5/0. This is a grip pin EWG 5/0 Mustad hook. I am a big fan of this hook, but I am trying to find a lighter wire flipping hook, straight shank hook that I'm a fan of for using for this technique anymore. Anyone have any recommendations? Leave them in the comments below, because I am trying to go to a straight shank hook for this and flipping this on 17 or 20 pound fluorocarbon. Listen, guys, most of the time on this lake, I'm going to tell you that fluorocarbon, well, here's the deal. Fluorocarbon is always going to get you more bites, whether you're flipping the outside edge, whether if you wanted to flip it into a mat, all right, it's going to get you more bites. But what follows is why I don't always use fluorocarbon. When you're going down the shoal flipping buggies with a 3/4 ounce jig, or you're flipping mats, you might get the bite, but you're not going to land the fish. You're not going to get that cutting, weed whacker action from the braid. You're not going to get the strength of the braid. You're going to break off and lose big fish, and it's going to make you mad. But this time of year, a lot of the times you're flipping to the most isolated and most subtle pieces of cover you can find, whether it's 2 little round reeds out in the middle of an open bay, whether it's $3 pads in a little clump like this, whether it's a stick, anything isolated, anything out in the middle of nowhere, that's going to be what you want to key in on, because that's what these fish are going to be setting up on to spawn. In that situation, these areas are usually very clean water, and these areas a lot of times are very pressured, again, with boats and things. The fish may not leave, the fish may be there, but they're going to be educated, they're going to be smart. Scaling down to a fluorocarbon line is going to get you 10 bites to a 1 than you would with 50 or 65 pound braid, and you don't have to have that worry in the back of your mind that the fish is going to break you off. Can it still happen? Yes, but in that super sparse cover, in that open water, you can play the fish a little bit more and you have more room for error, okay? Pitching this thing around, guys, it's a Florida staple, all right? Fish down here love a Senko or a stick style bait, whatever you want to call it, and it's a bite getter. Set up, get in an area that use the wind to your advantage, put the wind at your back. If you have power poles, use them. Find a bay, find an area with decent bottom content and or good bottom, hard bottom, and look for just sparse cover, pull down and make very accurate flips and pitches or short casts with this setup and milk that bait on the bottom as long as you can. Make multiple presentations to it. A lot of times I'll tell customers to throw at something and they look at me like I have 3 heads. Like, that one stick out there, yes, throw to it again, throw at it again, let it lay there, throw it again, you got them. Sometimes that fish is there. You're essentially, what you're doing is you're blind fishing the bed, all right? Unless you have forward facing and, then you can do all that, but your boy don't have that much coin. So I know this is like probably a dumb tip, but get you a good worm / light action flipping setup that you could put 17 or 20 pound fluorocarbon on, and you will catch a ton of fish doing this, and you're going to catch some of the biggest fish in the lake. The other thing is, I've tested it. You can go down and flip the same setup on 50 pound braid, and you might catch 8 fish, 5 fish, and go through the same area and catch 25 flipping the fluorocarbon. It definitely does make a difference this time of year when these fish are finicky. And again, they don't want to eat. Those fish are spawning. They're not looking at that as a meal. They're looking at it as a threat to their bed. And I always say this, when it's cold or cooler temperatures, that Senko style bait is just so effortless for them to pick up and move. Pay attention to where you flip as well. Can't tell you how many times you'll flip the bait, slackline it, let it dead stick, and when you go to lift up, your bait seems to be 4 or 5 feet or 4 feet off of where you flip to. Sometimes you account it to the wind maybe blew your line, but a lot of times that fish will pick that bait up by the tail and drag it off the bed, let it go, and go back. So be very, observant as to what's going on. And that's going to catch you some giant fish. this is a, not to do a plug here, but let's do a shameless plug. This is a 7.3 medium heavy fast BTO by Senko Sticks. I told Alex I needed a speed worm rod because throwing any kind of worm style bait this time of year is a big thing. He built me this. I usually throw it on a 7.6 medium heavy. He told me he has this blank. It's a 7.3. Give it a shot. I love it. It casts great. It's got the backbone. It's got a perfect amount of tip. I love this thing. And on this, I've just got a 7-speed reel. This is an arc gravity reel. And I think I've got 17-pound fluorocarbon on here right now. But just something that you could flip, you're comfortable with. It's very sensitive. These bites are not going to be very violent at all. They just barely pick up the bait. And this will be in my hand 80% of the time over the next 4 months when fishing out there. Everyone loves to catch them frogging. Everyone loves to catch them on a 7-11 flipping stick with 65-pound braid. But at the end of the day, a lot of times the conditions just don't call for it. So that's it. Those are my 3 tips for you. Hopefully you guys catch some big fish out there this winter, or maybe you book some trips with me and I can go try to put you on some big fish. Again, any of you guys that flip a lot more fluorocarbon with Senkos than I do, leave a comment below what straight shank hook you guys are using. But if you guys are in the market for an EWG hook for this situation, I'm not sponsored or affiliated with Mustad whatsoever. This 5/0 grip pin KVD hook is, I've had great success with it for 10 years now. So that's it. If you guys want to try a Senko Sticks rod, I believe they still have the promo code going. Tight Splice at checkout saves you like 10%. Couldn't say enough about this rod. Again, it's a 7.3 medium heavy fast. Great worm rod, great swim jig rod. You could throw a frog on it if you wanted to. Kind of very versatile setup. So that's it. I will see you guys on the next one, and tight lines and be safe out there.